We have been talking, Willie, over the past couple of days on the Sunday show. Yesterday, we've been talking, as have most White House reporters, have been talking about the president's just bizarre tweets over this past weekend. And obviously, he's been doing that for over 3 years, but they have gotten worse. And there have been some involving a woman who worked in my office back in 19 years ago. And the New York Times' Kara Swisher this morning has just posted an op-ed in the New York Times about what Twitter should do. A lot of people calling for Donald Trump to be taken off the site, or at least the tweets being taken down. Kara writes about that and also has a letter from the husband of Lori Klausutis, which, Mika, why don't you read that now?
Yeah, it's the full letter that she obtained from Timothy Klausutis. And the letter is to Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. And it reads, quote, Mr. Dorsey, nearly 19 years ago, my wife, who had an undiagnosed heart condition, fell and hit her head on her desk at work. She was found dead the next morning. Her name is Lori K. Klausutis, and she was 28 years old when she died. Her passing is the single most painful thing that I have ever had to deal with in my 52 years and continues to haunt her parents and sister. I have mourned my wife every day since her passing. I've tried to honor her memory and our marriage. As her husband, I feel that one of my marital obligations is to protect her memory as I would have protected her in life. There has been a constant barrage of falsehoods, half-truths, innuendo, and conspiracy theories since the day she died. I realize that may sound like an exaggeration. Unfortunately, it is the verifiable truth. Because of this, I have struggled to move forward with my life. The frequency, intensity, ugliness, and promulgation of these horrifying lies ever increases on the internet. These conspiracy theorists, including most recently the President of the United States, continue to spread their bile and misinformation on your platform, disparaging the memory of my wife and our marriage. President Trump on Tuesday tweeted to his nearly 80 million followers, alluding to the repeatedly debunked falsehood that my wife was murdered by her boss, former U.S. Representative Joe Scarborough. The son of the president followed and more directly attacked my wife by tweeting to his followers as the means of spreading this vicious lie. I'm sure you're aware of this situation because media around the world have covered it. But just in case, here it is. And here, TJ Klausutis pastes the tweets from President Donald Trump and one from his son, Donald Trump Jr. Timothy goes on, my request is simple. Please delete these tweets. I'm a research engineer and not a lawyer, but I've reviewed all Twitter's rules and terms of service. The president's tweets that suggest that Lori was murdered without evidence and contrary to the official autopsy is a violation of Twitter's community rules and terms of service. An ordinary user like me would be banished from the platform for such a tweet. But I'm only asking that these tweets be removed. I am now angry, as well as frustrated and grieved. I understand that Twitter's policies about content are designed to maintain the appearance that your hands are clean. You provide the platform and the rest is up to users. However, in certain past cases, Twitter has removed content and accounts that are inconsistent with your terms of service. I'm asking you to intervene in this instance because the President of the United States has taken something that does not belong to him, the memory of my dead wife, and perverted it for perceived political gain. I would also ask that you consider Lori's niece and 2 nephews who will eventually come across this filth in the future. They've never met their aunt, and it pains me to think that they would ever have to learn about her in this way. My wife deserves better. Thank you for your consideration. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Sincerely, Timothy J. Klausutis, Ph.D. Willie.
And Willie, the line here, and you know, I know all too well how much TJ has suffered, and how much he's told me his family has suffered, but he says in the letter that the president has taken something that doesn't belong to him, the memory of his dead wife, and perverted it for perceived political gain. You know, that's something that he has had to deal with for 19 years, whether it was, you know, from the far left of the internet or from Catherine Harris several years later on the internet, or from a far left website on the internet, or from the President of the United States. And, you know, every time they spread these lies, they're hurting the family. And there are parallels that Kara Swisher talks about with Sandy Hook, the Sandy Hook truthers, and with the Seth Rich conspiracy theory, except as Kara writes, this is perhaps even worse because the lies, the conspiracy theories, the hate speech is being spread by the President of the United States.
Yeah, and it used to come from these dark corners of the internet, as you said. This is coming from the President of the United States. And how sad and how sick and how sorry I am that TJ had to sit down and compose that letter about a wife he lost in her 20s, 19 years ago, that this all had to come back up. And, you know, the president showing no humanity whatsoever. If you want to come after us and our show like you have been for 4 years, that's fine. We can take that. We ignore it. We get on with our lives. But you're talking about someone who still grapples every day with the passing of his wife, with the untimely death of his wife. And you know, what happens in these cases, as Kara writes in her column with Sandy Hook and others, is people take these cues from the President of the United States. They take cues from media figures and they act on them. And Sandy Hook parents have been harassed now for 8 years. They've had to move, many of them. They've had to go into hiding because they're harassed by conspiracy theorists. So the idea that TJ now has to deal with this again and sit down and write this letter is truly appalling.
Well,
and whatever humanity the president may have, I hope he would appeal to it and listen to Lori's husband.
Well, and the family told the Washington Post, a member of the family told the Washington Post that they were afraid to speak out on this because they didn't want to be attacked by the internet trolls that have attacked and made the victims of Sandy Hook, the parents whose first grade children were slaughtered at Sandy Hook, made them live through the hell that they're now living through because of internet trolls, or Seth Rich's parents, what they have had to endure, and what the Klausutis, the entire family, have had to endure for 19 years. It's unspeakably cruel for whether it's the president or whether it's people following the president. It is unspeakably cruel.
And made worse by Twitter.
These are not public figures, nor have they ever been public figures. Anyway, I'm sorry, Willie, go ahead.
Well, Kara Swisher, who wrote this column, obviously she's the prominent Silicon Valley journalist, she writes in her column this: "Please delete those tweets," the widower begged in a letter last week to Twitter's chief executive Jack Dorsey. "My wife deserves better." Yes, Twitter, Lori Klausutis certainly does deserve better, writes Kara, nearly 2 decades after she died in a tragic accident that has morphed into a macabre and continuing nightmare for her husband, Timothy Klausutis. The boogeyman, plunging him and his family of his late wife into the very worst of memory holes, is a conspiracy theory-loving, twitchy-fingered, and often shameless tweeter who also happens to be the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. Kara continues, President Trump on Tuesday tweeted to his 80 million followers, alluding to the repeatedly debunked falsehood that my wife was murdered by her boss, former U.S. Rep. Joe Scarborough, the son of the president, followed and more directly attacked my wife by tweeting to his followers as the means of spreading this vicious lie, wrote Mr. Klasutis in a letter sent to Mr. Dorsey on Thursday that I obtained over the weekend. I'm asking you to intervene in this instance because the President of the United States has taken something that does not belong to him, the memory of my dead wife, and perverted it for perceived political gain. Again, reading from TJ's letter. Kara goes on to write, Mr. Klasutis deserves an answer from Mr. Dorsey, who has the unenviable task of sorting out what is perhaps unsortable, which is to say the ugly heart of Twitter's most famous customer. While sources close to the company said executives had been trying to figure out what to do over the weekend, the company has, at this writing, been silent about this controversy involving Mr. Trump's appalling and rule-breaking Twitter habit. This episode is not unlike other infamous stories floating around social media, like the inhumane speculation about the death of a Democratic National Committee staffer, Seth Rich, or the ocean of nasty misinformation about the murders of the children of Sandy Hook Elementary that got Alex Jones deservedly thrown off several platforms. Kara goes on to write, but this mess is perhaps the high tide of that endless spew of toxic bile because it is being relentlessly amped up by the leader of the free world. The Trump-Scarborough duo matters less here. They are both famous and have to suffer the slings and arrows of that trade, even if Mr. Trump is falsely accusing Mr. Scarborough of an affair and a murder. The real issue is the very serious collateral damage of this fight, which is the post-mortem libel of Ms. Klasutis and the ensuing suffering of her husband and family. They are the victims of Mr. Trump and of Twitter's inability to manage its troubled relationship with him. Another solution being discussed inside Twitter is to label the tweets as false and link to myriad high-quality information and reporting that refute the tweet's sinister insinuations. Sources told me, writes Kara, that after initial hesitance in dealing with Mr. Trump's tweets about Ms. Klasutis, the company has accelerated work on a more robust rubric around labeling and dealing with such falsehoods. Again, top company executives hope that this placement of truth against lies will serve to cleanse the stain. I think this is both naive and will be ineffective. Most people's experience tracks with that old axiom. A lie can travel halfway around the world while truth is still getting its shoes on. In the digital age, that would be to the moon and back 347 times, of course, which is why I am supportive, writes Kara, of the suggestion Mr. Klasutis makes in his letter to simply remove the offending tweets. Perhaps such a board to review offending tweets could include Mr. Klasutis, who might know more than most people about the price of all of this. TJ wrote, I have mourned my wife every day since her passing. I have tried to honor her memory and our marriage, he wrote to Mr. Dorsey, with the kind of enduring dignity that would be nice to see more of from our leaders. There has been a constant barrage of falsehoods, half-truths, innuendo, and conspiracy theories since the day she died. I realize that may sound like an exaggeration. Unfortunately, it is the verifiable truth. Because of this, I have struggled to move forward with my life. That from TJ's letter. Kara goes on to say, it is long past time to let him do that, and most of all, to let Lori Klasutis rest in peace. We'll be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.